The glass shattered against the marble floor. Jean Hawthorne didn't flinch as the whiskey spread across his office like blood. Outside, the Seoul skyline glittered with 1,000 lives he could ruin with a single phone call. Inside, he stood alone in the kind of silence that money couldn't fix. "Sir, the Hong Kong deal is waiting for your signature." His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. He didn't answer. The deal would wait. Everything waited for Jean Hawthorne. That was the problem. Nothing surprised him anymore. Nothing moved him. He had built an empire from his father's ashes, turned whispers of fear into absolute control, and somewhere along the way, he had stopped feeling anything at all. His phone buzzed. A message from his publicist. "Reminder, blind date tonight at Meridian, 8 p.m. Don't cancel this time. Your image needs this." Jean stared at the words. His image. As if he were a product to be packaged and sold. He supposed he was. The respectable CEO by day, the Shadow King by night. The man who funded children's hospitals while ensuring his enemies never saw morning. The contradiction didn't bother him anymore. Nothing did. He picked up his jacket and left. Across the city, in a cramped apartment that smelled like instant ramen and lavender detergent, Ara Kim was trying not to cry. "Mom, why are you wearing that fancy dress?" Her son Ethan looked up from his homework, his 10-year-old eyes too knowing for his age. I'm meeting someone for dinner, sweetheart." "Like a date." Ara forced a smile. Something like that. She hadn't been on a date in 3 years. Not since Ethan's father had walked out, leaving nothing but debt and a son who still sometimes asked when Daddy was coming home. Her best friend, Minji, had set this up, insisted that Ara needed to live a little before she forgot how. The man's profile had seemed decent enough, an accountant, stable, normal, exactly what she needed. "You look pretty, Mom." Ara knelt down and hugged him tight, breathing in the scent of his strawberry shampoo. "I love you. Mrs. Park will be here in 10 minutes to stay with you. Okay?" "Okay, have fun." She wouldn't. She knew that already. But she would try. For Ethan. For the version of herself that still believed in second chances. The Meridian restaurant occupied the top floor of one of Seoul's most expensive hotels. Ara had looked up the menu prices online and felt sick. Her date had insisted on meeting here, said he wanted to impress her. She wondered what kind of accountant could afford this place. She arrived at 7:32, 8 minutes early because she was always early, punctuality beaten into her by years of juggling 3 jobs and a school schedule. The hostess looked her up and down with the kind of smile that said, "You don't belong here," and asked if she had a reservation. "I'm meeting someone under the name Park Junho." The hostess checked her tablet. "Ah yes, table for 2, this way please." Ara followed her through the restaurant, past couples who dripped with jewelry and confidence, past businessmen who spoke in low voices about deals worth more than she would earn in a lifetime. The table was by the window, overlooking the city. It was beautiful, it was terrifying. She sat down and ordered water. Then she waited. 7:45. She checked her phone. No messages. 8 o'clock. Still nothing. 8:15. A knot formed in her stomach. 8:30. The waiter returned, his expression pitying. "Would Madam like to order?" "I'm still waiting for someone," she said, her voice smaller than she wanted it to be. "Of course." He left her with the menu and her humiliation. Jean arrived at the restaurant at 8:45, deliberately late because he had learned that power was often about making people wait. He gave his name to the hostess and saw recognition flicker in her eyes. Everyone in Seoul knew his face, even if they didn't know what he really did. "Mr. Hawthorne, your companion hasn't arrived yet." "That's fine. I'll wait at the bar." He ordered a scotch and surveyed the room. Couples. Always couples. People who had somehow figured out the equation he couldn't solve. How to care without it becoming a weakness. How to trust without leaving yourself exposed. How to love without losing control. His phone buzzed. A message from his date. "So sorry, got called into emergency surgery. Can we reschedule?" Jean almost laughed. She was a surgeon. She had probably never planned to come at all, just wanted the story of standing up Jean Hawthorne. He didn't blame her. He would have done the same. "Excuse me." The hostess appeared at his elbow, looking nervous. "We have a rather unusual situation. We're completely booked tonight, but we have a single guest who's been waiting for over an hour. Would you consider sharing a table? I know it's unorthodox." Jean looked past her and saw the woman by the window. She sat very still, hands folded in her lap, staring out at the city with an expression he recognized because he had worn it himself. Loneliness. "Show me to the table," Jean said. Ara saw him approaching, and her first thought was that the hostess had made a mistake. Men who looked like that didn't sit with women like her. He moved with the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no, his suit probably worth more than her monthly rent. She started to gather her purse. "Please don't leave on my account," he said, his voice low and careful. "The restaurant is overbooked. They asked if I would share. If you're uncomfortable, I can sit at the bar." Ara looked up at him, really looked. Past the expensive clothes and the sharp jawline, past the aura of power that preceded him like cologne. His eyes were tired, deeply, bone-achingly tired. She knew that look. She saw it in her mirror every morning. "You can sit," she heard herself say. "I was stood up anyway. Might as well have company in my humiliation." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. "I was stood up too." Really? Emergency surgery, apparently. Very convincing excuse. Ara felt a laugh bubble up, unexpected and genuine. Mine didn't even bother with an excuse, just never showed. Jean sat down across from her, and suddenly the enormous table felt intimate. "Then we're both pathetic. Speak for yourself. I'm tragic. There's a difference. Enlighten me. Pathetic is hoping for something better. Tragic is knowing you won't get it, and hoping anyway." Ara couldn't believe she was saying this to a stranger, but something about the moment felt unreal, like she had stepped outside her normal life and into someone else's story. Jean studied her for a long moment. "You're right. You are tragic. I'm just tired. Not pathetic? I stopped hoping a long time ago." The waiter appeared, breaking the moment. "Have we decided?" Ara glanced at the menu and felt panic rising. The cheapest entree was 60,000 won. She had budgeted 30,000 for the entire evening. "I'll just have the—" "We'll have the tasting menu," Jean said smoothly, "and a bottle of the 2015 Chateau Margaux." "Sir, I know what it costs." His tone didn't change, but the waiter straightened immediately and hurried away. Ara stared at him. "I can't let you pay for that." "Why not?" "Because I don't know you. Because it's too much. Because accepting kindness from a stranger feels like admitting you need help." Jean's voice was gentle, understanding. "I'm not trying to buy anything from you. I'm just tired of eating alone. If you leave, I'll be sitting here by myself ordering expensive wine. I don't really want to impress people I don't know. At least if you stay, the performance has an audience." Ara felt something crack open in her chest. Is that what your life is, a performance? Isn't everyone's? No. She said it firmly. No, some of us are too busy surviving to perform. "Tell me about that," Jean said, and he sounded like he genuinely wanted to know. So she did. She told him about Ethan, about working as a daytime secretary and nighttime tutor, about budgeting groceries down to the last one and still coming up short. She told him about her ex-husband, who had promised forever and delivered 18 months. She told him things she hadn't told anyone, because there was something about this stranger's tired eyes that made her feel safe. Jean listened. Really listened. Not the polite nodding he did in board meetings while planning his next move, but actual listening. He watched the way her hands moved when she talked about her son, the way her voice softened with love and hardened with determination. She was beautiful, but not in the way he was used to. No artifice, no calculation, just raw, exhausted honesty. "Your turn," Ara said finally, embarrassed by how much she had revealed. "What's your story?" Jean considered lying. He was good at it. He had built an empire on strategic deceptions, but something about this woman, this moment, made him want to be truthful. "My father built a criminal empire and died when I was 19. I inherited everything. The business, the enemies, the weight of maintaining an image that keeps the wolves from the door. I run legitimate companies by day. At night, I manage the family's other interests." He waited for her to recoil, to make an excuse and leave. Instead, Ara tilted her head. "That sounds lonely." "It is." "Is that why you're here, on a blind date?" "My publicist thinks a relationship will humanize my brand, make me seem more trustworthy." Jean heard the bitterness in his own voice. "What about you? Why did you agree to this?" "My best friend thinks I'm going to shrivel up and die if I don't put myself out there. She means well." They all mean well. They do. Ara smiled, and Jean felt something shift in his chest. But they don't understand that sometimes being alone is easier than being disappointed again. Exactly. The wine arrived. Jean poured for both of them, his movements practiced and elegant. Ara took a sip and felt warmth spread through her body. She couldn't remember the last time she had drunk wine that didn't come from a convenience store. "This is really good," she said. "It should be. It costs more than most people's car payments." "That's obscene." "It is," Jean agreed, "but it's also delicious. Obscenity and quality aren't mutually exclusive." Ara laughed again, and Jean realized he had been trying to make her do that, trying to see that light in her eyes. The first course arrived. Some delicate thing with foam and microgreens that probably had a French name Jean couldn't pronounce. They ate in comfortable silence, and Jean marveled at how rare this was. Silence without tension, without expectation, just two people existing in the same space. "Can I ask you something?" Ara said finally. "Yes." "Why did you really sit down? You could have stayed at the bar, could have left. Why share a table with someone like me?" Jean set down his fork. The honest answer felt dangerous, but he gave it anyway. "Because when I saw you sitting here alone, you looked the way I feel every day, and I thought maybe for one night we could be less alone together." Ara's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back quickly. "That's the saddest thing anyone has ever said to me." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It's also the most honest." They talked through 7 courses, about everything and nothing. Ara told him about Ethan's obsession with dinosaurs, how he could name every species from the Cretaceous period but still forgot to brush his teeth. Jean told her about inheriting his father's empire at an age when most people were figuring out college majors, about board meetings where men twice his age tested him, waiting for him to break. "Did you?" Ara asked. "Break? Almost. Many times." Jean's fingers traced the rim of his wineglass. "There was a night, maybe 6 months after my father died, when I stood on my balcony and thought about how easy it would be to just step off, to stop pretending I was strong enough for this." Ara's hand moved across the table, covering his. The touch was brief, instinctive, but it burned. "What stopped you?" "Spite, mostly. All the people waiting for me to fail. I couldn't give them the satisfaction." He looked at her hand, now withdrawn, and missed its warmth. "What about you? You must have had moments where it felt like too much." "Every day," Ara admitted. "But then Ethan comes home with a drawing he made for me, or he tells me about something funny that happened at school, and I remember why I keep going. He's my reason. What's yours?" Jean didn't answer immediately. He had never articulated it before, never had to. Control. If I stop, even for a moment, everything falls apart. The legitimate business, the underground operations, the careful balance I've maintained. People depend on me. Enemies watch for weakness. I don't have the luxury of breaking. That's not a reason to live. That's a reason to survive. They're different. Are they? Yes. Ara's voice was firm. Surviving is getting through the day. Living is finding moments that make the day worth getting through. Like this wine. Like this conversation. Like watching my son discover something new and seeing the whole world light up in his eyes. Jean felt something uncomfortable shifting in his chest, like a muscle that had atrophied from disuse suddenly being asked to work. "When did you become so wise?" "When I had no choice. Wisdom is just pain that's been processed enough times that you can find patterns in it." The waiter cleared their plates. Jean ordered coffee. Ara checked her phone and saw it was nearly 11. "I should go. Mrs. Park charges extra after midnight. Let me drive you home." "That's not necessary." "I know. Let me anyway." Ara hesitated. Every practical instinct screamed that she shouldn't get into a car with a strange man, especially one who had just admitted to running criminal operations. But his eyes held no threat, only a quiet plea that mirrored her own reluctance for the evening to end. "Okay." Jean's car was exactly what she expected. Sleek, black, probably worth more than her apartment building. The driver opened the door for her, and she slid into leather seats that felt like sitting on a cloud. Jean gave an address to the driver and settled beside her, careful to maintain distance. They drove through Seoul's nighttime streets in silence. Ara watched the city slide past, neon signs and late-night vendors and people stumbling home from Noribang sessions. Her city. Her life. For a few hours tonight, she had stepped out of it into something that felt like a dream. "Can I ask you something?" Jean's voice was soft in the darkness. "Yes. Your son, his father, do you still love him?" Ara considered the question. "No, I don't think I ever really did. I loved the idea of him, the stability he promised, the family we were supposed to build. But the real him, the man who walked away when things got hard? No, I don't love him. I don't even think about him most days. But you're afraid. Of what? Of trusting someone again, of building something that can be taken away." Ara turned to look at him. In the dim light from passing street lamps, his face was shadowed, vulnerable. "Yes, aren't you?" "Terrified," Jean admitted. "Everything I've built, everything I am, it's all armor. If someone got close enough to see what's underneath, they'd find nothing but fear and exhaustion." "I don't believe that." "Why not?" "Because people who are nothing but fear don't sit with strangers and tell the truth. They don't listen. They don't ask questions like they actually care about the answers." Ara's voice was gentle. "You're not empty, Jean. You're just tired of performing." Jean felt his throat tighten. When was the last time someone had seen him? Really seen him? Not the CEO, not the crime lord, not the carefully constructed image. Just him. The scared kid who inherited an empire. The lonely man who ate dinner alone in expensive restaurants. The human being underneath all the layers. What if I don't know how to be anything else? Then you learn. Same way you learned everything else. One day at a time, one moment at a time, one honest conversation at a time. The car pulled up in front of a modest apartment building in Mapogu. Ara gathered her purse, suddenly self-conscious about the peeling paint and the broken streetlight. This was her world, small, simple, so far removed from his universe of power and luxury. "Thank you for dinner," she said. "And for the conversation, I needed it more than I realized." "So did I." Jean pulled out his phone. "Can I have your number?" Ara hesitated. This was where it got complicated, where fantasy collided with reality. "Why? Because I'd like to see you again, if you want that." "I don't date, Jean. I don't have time. I barely have energy to keep my own life together, let alone—" "Then don't date me. Just talk to me. Text me when you're having a hard day, but let me text you when I'm sitting in another board meeting pretending to care about quarterly earnings. No expectations. No pressure. Just two people who understand what it's like to be tired." It was the honesty that broke her. The raw admission that he was as lonely as she was. Ara took his phone and entered her number, then handed it back. "No expectations?" "None, except honesty. I get enough lies in my daily life." "Deal." She climbed out of the car and walked toward her building. At the entrance, she turned back. Jean was watching her through the window, his expression unreadable. She waved. He nodded. Then the car pulled away, and Ara was alone again, but not quite as alone as before. Jean sat in the back of the car, Ara's number glowing on his screen. He had spoken to countless people today, negotiated deals worth millions, given orders that would change lives. But this conversation, this simple exchange with a struggling single mother, had touched something in him that he thought had died years ago. Hope. "Sir, where to?" his driver asked. Jean looked at the number again. Ara. He didn't even know her last name. Didn't know where she worked or what her dreams were or how she took her coffee. But he knew the important things. He knew her eyes when she talked about her son. He knew her voice when she spoke about survival versus living. He knew her touch when she had reached across the table, brief and warm and utterly without guile. "Home," he said finally. But as the car merged into traffic, Jean made a decision. He pulled up his assistant's contact and typed a message. "I need information on all scholarship programs we fund in the past year, specifically any recipients in Mapogu, elementary age. Send me the files tomorrow." He stared at the message before sending it. This crossed a line. This was using his resources to invade her privacy, to insert himself into her life without permission. But something Ara had said at dinner stuck with him. About her son, about wanting to give him opportunities she never had. Jean had the power to create those opportunities. He had funding programs, educational initiatives, connections to the best schools in Seoul. If her son was exceptional, if he showed promise, then ensuring he had access to resources wasn't interference. It was just good philanthropy. He sent the message. 3 days later, Jean sat in his office reviewing scholarship applications when he found it. Ethan Kim, age 10, Straight A's, teacher recommendations that glowed with praise, exceptional aptitude for science, natural curiosity, kind to his peers. And there, in the parent information section, guardian, Ara Kim, single mother, income level barely above poverty line. Jean's chest tightened. He had known she was struggling, but seeing it quantified in cold numbers made it real. She was drowning, working herself to exhaustion for a child who deserved every opportunity the world could offer. He could fix this. One signature and Ethan would have a full scholarship to Seoul International Academy, the best private school in the city. Tuition, books, uniforms, everything. The program was legitimate, funded through his foundation. Dozens of children received these scholarships every year. One more wouldn't raise questions. Jean signed the approval form. Then he texted Ara, "How was your day?" Her response came 20 minutes later. "Exhausting. Yours?" "Long, but better now. Flatterer? Honest? Coffee tomorrow?" There was a longer pause. Jean watched the 3 dots appear and disappear multiple times. Finally, "I have a 30-minute break at 2 p.m. There's a cafe near my office. Nothing fancy. Send me the address." Jean showed up 15 minutes early to the cafe Ara had suggested. It was exactly what she had described. Nothing fancy. Plastic chairs, fluorescent lighting, coffee that came from a machine instead of a carefully trained barista. It was perfect. Ara arrived exactly on time, slightly breathless, still wearing her work badge. Secretary at a mid-sized trading company. He had resisted looking her up, but the badge told him what he needed to know. She worked in a building 3 blocks away, probably made barely enough to cover rent. "You came," she said, surprised. "You thought I wouldn't?" "I thought you'd realize I'm not worth the effort." She said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity, and that somehow made it worse. Jean stood and pulled out her chair. "Coffee? Just regular. Black. I can't afford to develop expensive tastes." He ordered 2 coffees and returned to find her checking her phone, her forehead creased with worry. "Everything okay?" "Ethan's school called. They want to meet next week about some program he's been selected for. I'm trying to figure out how to take time off without losing pay." Jean's heart rate spiked. The scholarship notification. Already. What kind of program? "I don't know. They were vague. Probably wants to sell me on some after-school thing I can't afford." Ara pocketed her phone. "Sorry, I didn't mean to complain. How's your week been?" "Complicated. I made a decision that I think was right, but I'm not entirely sure the other person will see it that way." "Business decision?" "Personal, maybe both." Jean wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. "Do you believe in fate, Ara?" She considered this. "I believe in effort, in showing up, in doing the work. Fate is what people call it when effort and opportunity happen to meet." "What if someone creates the opportunity? Does that negate the fate? Is this about your decision?" "Yes." Ara studied him. "Did you create the opportunity for selfish reasons or generous ones?" "Both, honestly." "Then I think you need to be honest about that. With yourself. With whoever it affects." She reached across the table and touched his hand again, that same brief contact that seemed to rewire something in his brain. "Honesty is the only currency that actually matters, Jean. Everything else is just transaction." They talked for 28 minutes. About everything. About nothing. About Ethan's dinosaur phase and Jean's inability to sleep past 5 a.m. About her favorite season, autumn, when the ginkgo trees turned gold, and his, winter, when the city felt clean and sharp. When her phone alarm went off, Ara looked genuinely disappointed. "I have to go. Staff meeting." "Same time next week?" "I'd like that." Jean watched her hurry back to her building, coffee cup still in hand, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Contentment. Not the savage satisfaction of a successful business deal or the grim relief of neutralizing a threat. Just simple, quiet contentment. His phone buzzed. A message from his head of security. "Park situation resolved. He won't be a problem anymore." Jean stared at the message. Park Minho. A rival who had been making noise about expanding into Jean's territory. Resolved meant Park was either dead or so thoroughly broken he would never recover. Jean had given the order 3 days ago, the same day he had met Ara, and he had barely thought about it since. This was his reality. Coffee with a woman who made him want to be better, followed by confirmation that he had destroyed someone's life. The duality was dizzying. He typed back, "Understood." Then to Ara, "Thank you for making time. You made my day better." Her response, "You too. See you next week." The week crawled by. Jean attended meetings, signed documents, made decisions that affected thousands of lives. He dismantled a smuggling operation, negotiated a merger, donated 10 million won to a children's hospital. He did all of it on autopilot, counting down to Tuesday at 2 p.m. When the day finally came, Ara was already sitting at their table when he arrived. She had ordered his coffee. Black, like hers. The simple gesture felt monumental. "You remembered," he said. "You say that like it's difficult. You're not that complicated, Jean." "Everyone thinks I'm complicated. Korean Mafia boss who controlled everything except his code. Everyone doesn't know you." She pushed the coffee toward him. "I have news. Remember that program I mentioned? The one Ethan was selected for?" Jean's pulse quickened. "Yes? It's a full scholarship to Seoul International Academy. Full tuition, books, everything. I still can't believe it. They said he was selected based on merit, that some foundation funds deserving students. Jean, this changes everything. Everything. He'll have opportunities I could never give him. He'll have a future." There were tears in her eyes. Joy, pure, uncomplicated joy. And Jean felt like the worst kind of fraud. "That's incredible," he managed. "Your son must be exceptional." "He is. He's so smart, Jean, so curious. He deserves this. God, I can't stop shaking. I haven't told him yet. I want to surprise him after school." Jean watched her happiness and knew he should tell her, should confess that the scholarship wasn't fate or merit or divine intervention. It was him, his signature, his money, his desire to fix her life because he couldn't fix his own. But the words stuck in his throat, because telling her would steal this joy, would make her question whether Ethan truly deserved it, would introduce doubt into the purest moment of happiness he had witnessed in years. "He does deserve it," Jean said quietly, "and so do you. You've worked so hard for him. This is the universe recognizing that." Ara reached across the table and grabbed his hand, squeezing tight. "Thank you for being happy with me. I don't have many people to celebrate with." "Always," Jean said, and meant it even as the lie of omission sat heavy in his chest. They fell into a rhythm after that. Coffee twice a week, sometimes 3 times if their schedules allowed, text messages at odd hours. Ara would send him photos of Ethan in his new school uniform, beaming with pride. Jean would send her pictures of sunrises from his office, the city waking up beneath him. "Can't sleep either," she texted one night at 3 a.m. "Never can. You?" "Ethan had a nightmare. I'm still wound up." "Want to talk?" "Always." They talked until sunrise, about fears and dreams and the weight of responsibility, about what it meant to love someone more than yourself. Ara told him about the terror of raising a child alone, of knowing that every decision she made could shape or damage him. Jean told her about the impossible choice between honoring his father's legacy and building something better. "You could walk away," Ara said, "sell everything, start over." "And leave hundreds of people without protection? The legitimate employees I could relocate, but the others, the ones who depend on the family business for survival, they'd be absorbed by worse organizations, more violent ones. I'm not a good man, Ara, but I'm better than the alternatives." "That's a lonely burden." "It is. You don't have to carry it alone, you know." Jean's breath caught. "What are you saying?" There was a long pause. "I'm saying I care about you, more than I should, more than is probably smart. You're dangerous and complicated, and you live in a world I don't understand. But when I'm with you, I feel less alone. And I think you feel the same." "I do. So what do we do about it?" Jean stared at his phone, at this question that held so much weight. What did they do? He was falling for her, had probably already fallen. This woman with her fierce love for her son, and her brutal honesty, and her refusal to be anything less than authentic. She made him want impossible things, a normal life, a real relationship, the ability to come home to someone who saw him, not his empire. But how could he give her that when he was built on lies, when he had manipulated her son's scholarship, when his world was soaked in blood and secrets? "I don't know," he finally typed, "but I don't want to stop trying to figure it out. Me neither." 2 months became 3. 3 became 4. They never officially dated, never labeled what they were. But Jean showed up for Ethan's science fair and watched Ara's face glow with pride when her son won first place. Ara sent Jean voice messages when she was walking home late, just talking about her day, and he listened to them on repeat like they were music. He wanted to tell her. The truth sat in his throat every time they met. Every time she thanked the universe for Ethan's scholarship, every time she talked about fate and opportunities. But the longer he waited, the harder it became. How do you confess that you've been lying for months, that the foundation of her happiness was built on his deception? The answer came on a rainy Tuesday in October. Ethan's school was holding a donor appreciation event. Ara had mentioned it in passing, said she had to attend because scholarship families were required to show up and thank the benefactors. Jean's foundation was the keynote sponsor. He would be speaking. He should have told her then, should have prepared her. But cowardice won out. He convinced himself it would be fine. The crowd would be large. She might not even realize he was connected to the foundation. It was a stupid, desperate hope. Jean stood on stage in the school auditorium, looking out at hundreds of faces, parents, students, teachers, and there in the fifth row, her face frozen in recognition and confusion, was Ara. Their eyes met. He saw the moment understanding hit her, saw her expression shift from confusion to realization to something that looked like betrayal. She stood up, gathering her purse, and walked out. Jean stumbled over his words, lost his place in the speech, recovered poorly. The moment the applause started, he abandoned the stage. He found her in the parking lot, standing in the rain. She didn't have an umbrella, didn't seem to care. Ara, you knew. Her voice was flat. Dead. This whole time, the scholarship, the foundation, it was you. Yes. When? When did you do it? Jean felt the rain soaking through his suit. The night we met, I found out about Ethan 3 days later, approved the scholarship the same day. Before you even really knew me. Yes. Why? She turned to face him, and he saw tears mixing with rain on her face. Why would you do that? Because you were struggling. Because Ethan deserved opportunities. Because I had the power to help, and because you wanted to play God? Her voice cracked. Because you felt sorry for the poor single mother? Because it made you feel good about yourself? No, because I was falling in love with you, and I didn't know how to just be with you without trying to fix everything. The words hung in the air between them. Jean hadn't meant to say them, hadn't planned this confession. But there they were, raw and true and terrifying. Ara wiped her face. You don't get to say that. You don't get to tell me you love me in the same breath as admitting you've been lying for months. I never lied. Omission is still lying, Jean. Every time I thanked the universe, every time I talked about fate, every time I celebrated Ethan's merit, you stayed silent. You let me believe in something that wasn't real. His merit is real. The scholarship committee reviews every application blind. I approve funding, but I didn't choose him specifically. He earned this. How am I supposed to believe that? How am I supposed to believe anything you say? Ara's voice broke completely. I trusted you. I let you into my life, into my son's life. I thought you were different. I thought you understood what honesty meant. I do understand. That's why I'm telling you now. That's why I've been trying to figure out how to confess without destroying what we have. We don't have anything, Jean. We have a lie wrapped in expensive coffee and late-night texts. We have my fantasy that someone like you could actually care about someone like me without ulterior motives. There were no ulterior motives. I care about you. I care about Ethan. The scholarship had nothing to do with trying to buy your affection. Then what was it? Charity? Pity? Love. Jean stepped toward her, desperate. It was love. Messy and premature and probably inappropriate, but it was love. I saw you struggling, and I had the power to ease that struggle, and I took it. Maybe that was wrong. Maybe I should have asked permission. But I won't apologize for wanting to help you. Ara shook her head. I don't need saving, Jean. I need honesty. I need someone who sees me as an equal, not a project. I do see you as an equal. No, you don't. Equals don't keep secrets like this. Equals don't manipulate circumstances and call it love. She started walking toward her car. I need time. I need to think about what this means for Ethan, for the scholarship, for everything. Ara, please, don't. She turned back one last time. Don't follow me. Don't text me. Don't try to fix this with money or power or whatever tools you usually use. Just give me space. Jean watched her drive away and felt something inside him shatter. The rain continued. The parking lot emptied. He stood there alone, the same way he had stood alone in his office the night they met, and wondered if this was his punishment. To finally find someone who made him feel human, only to lose them because he couldn't stop being the person he had always been. His phone buzzed. A message from his security team about some crisis that needed immediate attention. Gene ignored it. For the first time in his life, the Empire could wait. He had destroyed something more valuable than any deal, any territory, any carefully maintained balance of power. He had destroyed the first real thing he had felt in years. 3 days passed. Gene didn't text her, though he typed and deleted dozens of messages. He threw himself into work, dismantling a trafficking ring with more violence than necessary, negotiating contracts with barely contained rage. His assistant asked if he was feeling well. His security chief suggested he take time off. Gene ignored them all. On the 4th day, his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered anyway, desperate and pathetic and hoping. "It's me." Ara's voice quiet and tired. "Can we talk?" "Yes. Anywhere. Anytime. The cafe. Tomorrow. 2 p.m. She hung up before he could respond. Gene arrived 30 minutes early, ordered 2 black coffees, sat at their table and tried to prepare for whatever came next. Apology, explanation, groveling. He would do whatever it took. Ara walked in exactly on time. She looked exhausted, beautiful and exhausted and guarded in a way she hadn't been since their first meeting. She sat down across from him and folded her hands on the table. "I talked to Ethan's principal," she said without preamble. Showed her Ethan's application. She confirmed that the academic committee selects recipients without knowing who funds what. Your foundation just approves the final list. Ethan really did earn this on merit. Gene exhaled. "I told you the truth about that." "You did. You also lied about everything else." "I know. I've spent 4 days trying to decide if I can forgive you, if I even want to forgive you." Ara's eyes met his. "And I realized something. I'm angry. I'm hurt. I feel manipulated and stupid and betrayed. But I also understand why you did it." "You do?" "You're a man who solves problems, who controls outcomes, who can't stand to watch people suffer when you have the power to stop it. That's not evil, Gene. It's just limiting." "Limiting?" "You can't love someone and control them at the same time. You can't build intimacy on secrets, even well-intentioned ones. If we're going to be anything to each other, anything real, you have to let me make my own choices. Even if those choices mean struggling, even if it kills you to watch." "Can we be something real?" Ara was quiet for a long time. "I don't know. I'm terrified, Gene. Of you, of this, of how much I've already started to need you. You live in a world I don't understand, a dangerous world, and you've proven you'll make decisions about my life without consulting me. How do I trust that?" "You can't. Not yet. I have to earn it back." Gene leaned forward. "So let me earn it. Let me show you that I can be honest, even when it's hard, even when it means admitting I don't have all the answers. Give me a chance to be the man you deserve instead of the man I've always been. No more secrets? No more secrets. No more playing God with my life. I'll try. I can't promise I won't want to. Can't promise I won't struggle every time I see you tired or stressed or worried, but I promise I'll talk to you instead of acting unilaterally." Ara reached for her coffee, took a sip, set it down. Okay, we can try. Slowly, carefully, with a lot of talking and probably some therapy because we're both damaged enough to need professional help. A small smile touched her lips. "But okay." Gene felt something he hadn't felt since that first night. Hope. Real, terrifying, fragile hope. "I don't deserve you?" "Probably not, but I don't deserve you either, so maybe we're even." Ara extended her hand across the table. "Hi, I'm Ara Kim. I'm a single mother who works too hard and doesn't sleep enough. I have trust issues and a son who's smarter than me and approximately 3,001 in savings. I'm a disaster. Want to be a disaster together?" Gene took her hand, held it tight. "I'm Gene Hawthorne. I run a criminal empire and legitimate corporations, and I haven't slept properly in a decade. I have control issues and enough enemies to fill a stadium and more money than I know what to do with. I'm also a disaster. I'd like nothing more than to be one with you." They sat there, hands joined, coffee growing cold, and laughed, because it was absurd, because it was impossible, because somehow against all logic and reason, it might actually work. Outside, Seoul continued its endless motion. Inside that small cafe with its plastic chairs and fluorescent lights, 2 broken people chose each other. Not perfectly, not completely, just honestly. and for the first time in both their lives, that felt like enough.